Yeah, family, y'all. Just keep it tight, keep it tight, keep it tight. Oh, right. Yeah. Here we go.
Natural law today. So that helps this. What we've talked about helps to set up the context of natural law. We remember back from our course in ethics how it is that these notions arose in the ancient world, and how it was that during the Middle Ages, by the High Middle Ages, we were formulating these concepts which carried over in St. Thomas Aquinas to the 1960s. Where's natural law at today? So we do see hints of natural law in various church documents. So that, for instance, Pope Pius XI, in his encyclical on Christian marriage in 1930, so remember he was trained in scholastic philosophy and theology, he was trained in this thought of St. Thomas Aquinas. He said, "No reason for going against nature can be naturally or morally good." Meaning, if you go against nature, that's wrong. He said, "The conjugal act is destined primarily by nature for the begetting of children." The conjugal act is a code word for what? Sex. Sex is for having children. And he said, "To frustrate sex's natural power and purpose is shameful and intrinsically vicious." Intrinsically evil. It's intrinsically evil. It's wrong to go against nature. You were made a certain way, you were given a certain body, and when you do certain things like have sex, it's for the purpose of procreation. That was 1930, so of course we're going to advance with time. And 1951, Pius XII, in his address to midwives, said, "The part played by nature and the part played by us are precisely determined." Meaning, nature has a certain role. Don't try to usurp it. Don't try to take it away. Let Mother Nature do what Mother Nature does. Act according to your nature. Pope Paul VI, Humanizing, that's the one against artificial birth control. Big issue. Here in Austin, we have Pedro Kaufman, the son of Esteban Kaufman, who helped to invent the birth control pill, who talks about Pope Pius VI. This gives us some insight into his thinking. He said, "Each and every marriage act," again, what is marriage act a code word for? Sex. "Each and every marriage act, or sexual encounter, must remain open to the transmission of life. The human person has no such dominion over his or her generative faculties as such because of their intrinsic ordination toward raising up life, of which God is the principle." If you're having sex, you don't get to decide whether you're having a child or not. That goes to God. All of the natural, what do they call those? The natural rhythm, natural family planning methods in the Roman Catholic Church. What are all those based on? This premise, natural law theory. If it's God's will that you have a child, you have a child. Don't go against nature. Over in the Vatican, there are different departments. One of them is the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. You remember that Pope Benedict XVI, before he became Pope, Joseph Ratzinger, he was in charge of this congregation. In 1975, in Persona Humana, they said, "The main reason that masturbation is an intrinsically and seriously disordered act," well, those are pretty strong words, "is that whatever the motive for acting in this way, the deliberate use of the sexual faculty outside normal conjugal relations," code word, sex, "essentially contradicts the finality of the function." Meaning, people, open up your eyes. This is 1975. If you masturbate, you're going against nature. Imagine what this does to a person's psyche. But we'll continue this and we'll come back to that example in a few moments here. 1986, now that we're progressing in time. The pastoral care of homosexual persons. The congregation said, "Homosexual acts are deprived of their essential finality and are intrinsically disordered." Why? Because you're going against nature. Where did that idea come from? Natural law, St. Thomas Aquinas, all the seminarians that were schooled from the 13th century into the 1960s, all studied natural law. It's only natural that they would say things like this. 1987, the instruction on respect for human life in its origin and on the dignity of procreation. Okay, let's switch subjects and talk about artificial insemination. Good, bad, right, wrong, what do you think? Artificial insemination within marriage cannot be admitted, except for those cases in which the technical means is not a substitute for the conjugal act, code word for sex, but serves to facilitate and to help so that the act attains its natural purpose. Meaning, is artificial insemination natural? No. Don't do it. I know. It's the 21st century now, and we're able, especially outside of the Roman Church, to be able to look at these things more critically. Be able to say, wait a minute, God gave us brains. So that, for instance, if the human inclination is to procreate, the persons can still procreate even without that conjugal act. Code word for sex. Right? We can still achieve these ends through the use of our brains and through science. Karl Rahner. Gotta love Karl Rahner. He was the Jesuit that lived from 1904 to 1984, so during the lifetime of many of us, died only 31 years ago. Karl Rahner said, for contemporary, and anytime we see brackets, it's simply because they were writing in a different era, and they were using words like man and he, so it's the 21st century, we're a bit more inclusive now. For contemporary humankind, nature is no longer the lofty viceroy of God. Let's unpack that for a moment. Who is the viceroy? The viceroy, when the king of Spain sent explorers, the king and queen of Spain sent explorers to America, the people who ruled New Spain were the viceroys. They ruled in place of the king. Interesting. So what he's saying is that for contemporary humankind, nature is no longer the viceroy of God, saying that nature rules us and that's how God wanted us to be. One which lies beyond our control, but instead has become the material which he or she needs so as to experience him or herself in his or her own role of free creator. Ooh, did you just catch those two words? Free creator. If God created us free, which is a tenet of Karl Rahner's theology, God made you free to choose, then you can take that freedom and do good things with it. Our own role of free creator, and so as to build his or her own world for him or herself according to his or her own laws. Karl Rahner is writing after all that artificial birth control discussion of the 1960s, saying, wait a minute, people, are we going to remain stuck on this natural law theory, saying that artificial birth control, the pill or the condom, is intrinsically evil? Are we going to say that forever? Or are we going to come to realize how it is that someone in Mexico, Pedro Kaufman and his friends, took the wisdom of the indigenous people of Mexico. They knew that if you ate a certain yam, you were not going to get pregnant. Where does the birth control pill come from? It comes from a yam in Mexico. You follow me? And if you eat that yam, you don't get pregnant. Our ancient ancestors knew that. All they did was they took that and they put it in the form of a pill. We could have shipped the yams all around, right? And so what's happening is Karl Rahner is saying, God gave us this mind to be able to take that yam and put it into yam pills that we can send around the world so that people are able to use their freedom to decide what they're creating. We're all co-creators with God. Yes, God created us, but after God created us, got news for you, you are a co-creator. You create history with God now. You create history. By choosing to come to class tonight, you chose, you made history. By doing whatever you did today, you chose to do those things. You're creating history. Karl Rahner is saying, we are all creating history. We're taking this mind that God gave us as co-creators, and we're creating history. How's that for a different view from all of this natural law theory? Karl Rahner gave us a very different view. Georgetown philosopher Louis Dupre, during the 1960s birth control debates, and these were big debates, there were a lot of priests who, I shouldn't say a lot, but there were a number of priests who left the church because of their difference on these issues, right? Now that we took Mexican yams and put them in the form of a pill and started distributing to people who wanted to be responsible, there were Catholic priests who were standing up and defending these people. who wanted to be responsible and said, give me the yam pill. So Louis Dupre said, such a way of reasoning about nature, natural law theory, such a way of reasoning about nature contains, I feel, two basic flaws, two basic mistakes. What are they? It confuses our biological structure with our human nature, and it takes human nature as a static, unchangeable thing rather than as a principle of development, as something that changes. Isn't it true that we change over time? Our biological life and its intrinsic laws are but one aspect of human existence. Got news for you. Whether you were born into a male body or a female body, that's only one part of who you are. You follow me? You're much more than your body. Father Charlie Curran, oh my word, he lived on the margins of the Roman Catholic Church for so long. Roman Catholic priest who simply didn't go along with the message of the hierarchy on many issues. He said, natural law, this theory, is built on a static or unchanging view of nature as a finished product. It's not that we change, it's just everything is static, it doesn't change. And it doesn't allow for any change or historical development, and it doesn't allow for the creative intervention of reason to humanize patterns of nature. Think about the beauty of those words. By using the birth control pill, what did we do? It was a creative intervention. What our friends in Mexico did with the yam pill, that was so creative, and it was a way of humanizing our patterns of nature. No longer are we animals subject to the laws of nature. We can actually choose our future. We're humanizing patterns of nature. If we want to have a child, we can choose to have a child. If we don't want to have a child, we can choose not to have a child. We're humanizing patterns of nature. That was Father Charlie Curran. How interesting. Father Richard Gula points out in his book that humans are different from all other animals. How? Because we don't have to conform to nature as a matter of fate. Animals, got news for you, if two animals do the conjugal act, code word for it. That's tongue-in-cheek. Because conjugal, it means married, right? Do we know where that word conjugal comes from? Have we seen that word before? Conjugal love, or in Spanish, how do we say conjugal in Spanish? Conjugal. Conjugal. If you break apart the word, the root is yugo. What is a yugo in Spanish? Yugo is a yoke. The yoke that you put on your oxen. So what does it mean to be living the conjugal life? When you're married, you're living the conjugal life. It means that you are yoked together with the other person. Till death do you part. Right? They so way, right? In marriage, oye way, right? Right? In marriage, the conjugal act means that the two of you are yoked together. Animals don't have that. Human beings, we commit ourselves to one another. Animals don't have that. So it was tongue-in-cheek. But when animals have sex, right, when they're pursuing this inclination to procreate, what's happening is that they have to conform to nature as a matter of fate, right? Two dogs get after one another. What results is going to be up to nature. They can't choose any means of artificial birth control. Follow me? We as human beings are different. We're not dogs. We don't have to just rely on nature. Being different from animals, we don't have to conform to nature as a matter of fate. Rather, nature provides the possibilities and the potentials for making human life fully human. What makes us different from the dogs? That we can choose whether we're bringing puppies into this world or not. Follow me? Whether we're having kids or not. And by doing that, that makes us more fully human. Physical and biological orders don't dictate moral obligations, but provide data and possibilities for our use in order to achieve our goals. And so we can creatively intervene to direct the natural order. And so how beautiful that this procreation. We are inclined to this as human beings. And if there's something that inhibits that, then we have things like in vitro fertilization or artificial insemination, so that we can continue to pursue this, even if perhaps not by natural ways, as some people have previously judged. Right? They say you're going against nature. No, I'm using the brain that God gave me to fulfill these inclinations that we all have as human beings. Our exercise of reason is limited by our capacities. Think about this. This is serious condemnation of natural law theory, because when we say something is right or wrong, that's conditioned by our own capacities. It's conditioned by our cultural conditions and the folk ways in which we find ourselves. It's limited by our biases. It's limited by our emotional involvements, etc. So all of our moral judgments are limited, and our claims have to be more modest. So when the church says that certain things are right or wrong, it could be a result of, say, certain biases. The church, the leaders of the church could be acting out of certain biases or certain folk ways, certain cultural conditions, etc. Should we take that as universal law? But how interesting, Father Richard Gula concludes this chapter by saying, think about it for a moment, how interesting that the church, on the one hand, it says that teachings that relate to sexual matters and to medical matters, sexual and medical ethics, we can know with certainty and precision that these things are right and these things are wrong. How interesting. When it comes to social issues, the church says that we need to be more cautioned and nuanced. Wait a minute. How can we be so certain about sexual and medical things, but yet when it comes to social realities that we have to be more cautious and nuanced? Why can't it be the other way around? Or at least, why can't we say the same about sexual and medical issues, right? Then maybe we need to be more careful and nuanced rather than telling people that certain things are intrinsically evil, right? Rather than telling people that using the birth control pill is intrinsically evil, it's going against nature, why can't we as a church be more cautious? The U.S. bishops in 1983, when they wrote The Challenge of Peace, they acknowledged the complexity of social issues. They say on complex social questions, the church expects a certain diversity of views, even though all hold the same universal moral principles. We're going to expect on certain social questions that there's going to be a diversity of views. Why can't there be a diversity of views when it comes to sexual and medical ethics too? Whoa! We as Catholics are able to ask that out loud. For all of our friends in the Roman Church, there is no asking of questions and thinking that medical and sexual ethics are complex and should be more nuanced. No. The church says certain things are right and certain things are wrong. And if I were a Roman Catholic, if I were a Roman Catholic priest, I'd be expected to toe the party line. To stand up here and to tell you what's right and what's wrong. What's right and what's intrinsically evil. How it is that y'all are sinning by going against nature. How it is that you're going against God's will every time you go against your human nature. Natural law theory.
Now, I have trouble with using the word nature because everything in nature, if you look at it, maybe, if you're going to say that God made it like that, it's raw. And it needs work. Let's say even vegetables are cooked. We change them. My pecan trees in the back, I graft them. My peach trees, I graft them. I need to trim them, or they won't put out sufficient or large enough fruit. So everything in nature needs to be worked. And when you look at something like that, those four things, it's kind of ridiculous to me. Like, not everybody is social. Not everybody's inclined to be social. Some people don't want to be social. And God bless them. Let them be how they want to be. And not everybody wants to procreate. Some people, hundreds of people, thousands here in Austin don't have kids and don't want to have kids. They don't want to. So, to say that those four things, and if if a person is natural, what is the person like if he's natural? He's going to be raw. He needs to be educated. He needs to go to church and learn, and refine himself, or herself, or whatever.
But I'm hearing the beauty of this course is that we can begin asking questions. We can see where does the Catholic Church has gotten its stance, but also we can critically
Right.
reflect on that and say,
Yes.
wait a minute, isn't it time, wouldn't it be nice to go out and have coffee tomorrow morning with one of your Roman Catholic friends? I would love to go out with a Roman Catholic priest for coffee tomorrow morning. Just to be able to say, dude, look at where
Yeah.
all of your thought comes from. Do you remember back to your courses in moral theology? Right? Ulpian, the Stoics, how it was that all of this shaped Thomas Aquinas, how it was that Thomas Aquinas shaped the theology that came down for years. What are you telling your congregants? What are you telling your parishioners on Sunday? Are you telling them that something is intrinsically evil because of this system of beliefs? And is that following the footsteps of Christ? If Jesus got up to preach in your congregation, would he be saying the same? Would he be saying that taking the yam pill
He'd
is
be saying
intrinsically
that
evil?
the gay community is a superior culture. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
It would be
No, we don't know. We don't know. We haven't evolved enough yet, to know what is best, So we have to be open and accept everybody and love everybody.
How interesting that we are involved, that we are evolving as a church. When we're outside the structure, we're free to ask questions, rather than when you're right in the culture. Right? When you're in the family, if you have parents that are a certain way that don't allow for conversation, you're going to act a certain way. What happens when you step out of that context? Then you're going to start asking other questions. That's what I sort of see us doing here. Is once we step outside of the context, we can start asking questions and saying to ourselves, "Whoa, that sort of makes sense. Why the church says certain things." When you take a look at the Catholic Church, everything that they say makes sense within the context from which they say it. And if this is how you see the world, then that's the conclusion that you're going to come to. Anything that goes against nature is intrinsically evil and wrong. But at least we can see the presuppositions on which that's built. Mario?
I know situations where this family had to make a decision about having their son, vasectomy, because he has the mind of a 6-year-old.
There you go.
So, and they're very Catholic, but it was very tough for them to make that decision.
So what is this? Remember back to our course in ethics when we came to the end of the care ethics chapter? How was it? There's a situation, okay, this child is never going to have more than the mentality of a 6-month-old. Right? How it was that the parents, for instance, chose to put them on certain growth hormones so that he wouldn't grow, so that they could take care of him. Wait a minute, they did what? That's going against nature. You follow me? Giving him a vasectomy, right? In the case of that daughter, right? They did what they needed to do so that she would not have all the pains of menstruation and all this. Wait a minute. You're going against nature. That is intrinsically evil. Is that the message we should be giving those parents? That what they're doing is intrinsically evil? Or that they're doing those things because they care about their daughter? You love your daughter and that's why you did it. You're not going to hell, even though there's a priest out there who's saying that what you did is intrinsically evil because it's going against nature. All of this is leading us to, the chapters that come have everything to do with moral discernment. So now that we're coming to the end of this course, how do we take all of these things that we've learned as Catholics, particularly as those who stand outside of the Roman tradition, to be able to begin to make sense of all of this and to help ourselves and one another to make the best decisions possible in any circumstance?
But this family has felt guilty all that time. I just tell them, just...
Why have they felt guilty again? Every time we, the guilt that we often experience is the should, right? I should have done this, I shouldn't have done this, etc. Where do those voices come from? We learned in previous classes, that's the super ego. Anytime you hear the word should, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Where's that coming from? That's coming from some voice on the outside. It's time to think about which voice told me I shouldn't do that, and was that based on? Because that voice may have been based on this ancient system of thinking.